Hey everyone. Well, welcome back to the Day in the Life podcast, Career Insights from ConsultSpot. Here we interview people from various careers, learn a little bit about their day-to-day, what it takes to get the job, compensation, etc. This is brought to you by ConsultSpot, the platform that lets you book one-on-one calls with people who are in schools or careers that are of interest to you so that you can get personal advice and make better informed career decisions. If you'd like to speak to any of the guests featured on the podcast or anyone else in an area of interest for you, you can just send us an email at hello@consultspot.com or just check out consultspot.com and we'll set you up. Like I said in the last episode, I have no clue what I'm doing. So if you have any feedback on the podcast, feel free to send us a note. I would love to hear about guest recommendations, questions you'd like to ask the guests we have on the podcast, anything that would be helpful to you. I want to make sure this is as useful as possible. Anyways, let's get started. Our guest for today is my good friend Brian McCarthy. Brian is a technology strategy consultant at Slalom, which is a management consulting firm, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about what a day in his life is like. All right, let's dive in. Hey, Brian. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Amish.
Cool. So, Brian, could you give us a high-level overview of your role?
Sure. So right now I'm a consultant or technology strategist at Slalom in Boston.
Okay. And how did you end up in your current role? Could you give us a sense of your background, all from college for onwards?
Sure. So it's a little bit of a roundabout route for me. That's just kind of the kind of person I am. I like to try out a bunch of different things and figure out what I do and don't like. That's really how I ended up consulting. So I started out actually in chemical engineering, and by junior year I realized pretty quickly that I definitely did not want to do this. It was a little too in the weeds for me personally. And I was talking to consultants, people I knew at PwC and other firms, and just talking about their experiences made me realize it was a bit more broad, a bit more high level. It seemed much more interesting to me. So by senior year, I decided I won't necessarily go towards that direction yet. I want to learn a bit more. So I went to MBA actually at the same school right after my undergrad and studied business analytics, finance, and of course, general administration. And fortunately, second year, I was able to get a job at Slalom in Hartford, actually, in Connecticut. And so that was great at first. I definitely liked the firm a lot, really good culture. That was something that really helped a lot, what kept me there for until now. But what I quickly realized through that was it was still too implementation based. It was a bit kind of staff augmentation, and I wanted to get a bit more into the strategy sphere. And so I started talking to people throughout the firm, just really networking as much as possible, and ended up speaking with technology strategy practice, the director over in the Boston office, and just seemed like a great opportunity, A, to get more in strategy sphere, but also to fill in a gap I was quickly realizing existed in my knowledge and skills base, which was really the foundation of technology. I was never a developer, but I wanted to get a bit more of that technology foundation. And so I figured this would be a great start at least. And so, yeah, about a year ago, I switched over to technology strategy in Boston. And yeah, that's where I am right now. And so far, I like it a lot.
So your initial role was more so actual tactical and you're in the weeds, like helping with the implementation, and now it's more so strategic and a little bit more advisory role with the clients is my guess.
Great. Yeah, exactly. And that's probably in a nutshell the best way to put it. The first role is really, like I said, implementation, in some ways staff augmentation, which essentially just means you're at the client for just not a fixed time period, not a fixed project, and you're just helping out with different projects or different situations. Over time, it morphed into actual strict projects. In the end, it was all still useful knowledge of project management, agile, data migrations, a lot just to do with tech. It definitely helped me learn a lot about that whole realm. But then, yeah, strategy now is a bit more short projects, high level, C-suite level, or senior leadership, speaking with them, trying to devise just overall strategies, enterprise architectures, that whole shebang.
I think a lot of people get into consulting, but they might land in pockets that are not long-term interests for them, sort of like yourself. what advice would you give to someone, or from your own experience, what did you have to do to kind of make that switch internally? I'm assuming part of it's just having good standing within your company if you're trying to switch internally, but did you have to, take specific courses or, learn new skills in order to make that transition?
So I'd start by saying a couple of things. One is that there's really no set path. You don't have to do this or that, but there's definitely, I'd say what helped the most for me is consulting is just awesome. There's a reason why I went to consulting, and that's because I knew there was so much flexibility and there's so much you can potentially learn. I mean, so much consulting is all about, a mile wide and not so deep. You can go deep if you
Mm-hmm.
want, but at least when you start, you can develop that breadth rather than the depth, which is really great for me because I was still trying to figure out what I wanted. And as I slowly started to figure it out, it definitely, as I took on projects, I realized what I did like and what I didn't like, mostly what I didn't like. And so I think, so that's part of it, was really just looking at myself and seeing looking at these projects I've done, which ones do I not like at all, which ones do I definitely want to do, and start to slowly just check those off, and slowly figure out where do I want to gain a bit more depth. And so in tandem with that a bit too, it's just a lot of self-reflection, just thinking about what do I want in my career, consistently going back to where do I see myself 5 years, 10 years, blah, blah, that normal kind of just strategy, trying to plan into the future and just thinking, where are my strengths? What is really useful in the world right now? And what I want to do, what's actually interesting to me. And so a combination of what I've just saying there, those two things, reflection and what I like doing, what I can do, but also definitely just doing all the projects. Yeah, sure, that helps. But networking was huge too. Just meeting people through sustainability initiatives, through data analysis, AI kind of initiatives, different COEs, centers of excellence in the company. Following my interest and just meeting people through that and just talking about them through that. And they introduced me to other people or not. Either way, I still learn a bit. Just essentially just trying to learn as much as possible and meet as many people as possible. And eventually, maybe I find an area that actually interests me a lot and I actually want to head in that direction. I guess the last point, similar note in terms of just constantly learning, which is just me in a nutshell, is always trying to learn. It, I I don't necessarily say you have to get any certifications or you have to go for any areas to learn, but what helped for me a lot was just constantly, every I want to say semester. I feel like I'm still stuck in college mindset. Um, uh, every quarter, couple of quarters, I look towards what kind of certification would be helpful, or at least what type of learning would help me a lot in where I am right now. Recently, I got TOGAF, which is enterprise architecture. So, reason I bring that up is just it helped me to enhance my skills and be more valuable in my current role, as well as to potential future roles. Just constantly continuous learning, constantly trying to improve myself, so I can potentially move on to better things that are more fit to that depth
Mm-hmm.
area I'm trying to discover still.
Got it. And what does a typical day look like for you right now? Like on an average day, like what specific activities are you doing?
I mean, it depends on the day. I feel like it's especially consulting. That's the great thing. There's a reason I don't want to do engineering because I feel like a lot of time it's really just a lot of the same thing every single day. Not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily, but kind of is. Consulting, it's depends on the project. Some projects it might be the same for a few days, a few weeks, maybe. But in the end, you're constantly like what I'm doing right now with technology strategy is, one week I'm on like a 6 week project. One week I might be starting to dig through all the materials that the client has given us in terms of like their overall strategy, data structures, architectures, what they've done well, what they've completely messed up on, which is usually the case. And then the next week, I might actually be setting up workshops, either trying to just gather more information on whether the value drivers or overall strategy, or trying to understand their current state architecture. And I want to see that week two, if that's workshops, often it'll be some form of that for the next few weeks. So essentially, I do a lot of, um, on the one hand, analysis and materials that are already created. On the other hand, workshops where it's just meeting with like anywhere from like 1 to 3 to 15 to 20 people, one room on a Miro board or an actual whiteboard, speaking to them, trying to gather information from them. And then the third thing often doing is just synthesis, rather than the analysis, which are the other two. This one's more the synthesis, where I'm taking all that I've learned, heard from people, and figuring out what are themes I'm seeing, what kind of strategies can we develop, and what kind of architecture should I develop, and what kind of roadmap should we develop? Things like that. It depends on the project, but it's analysis synthesis. That's probably it in a nutshell. But that's a little cliche.
Got it. And would you say your specific title, you said technology consultant?
Technology strategy consultant, or just consultant.
Okay. Do you know if your specific role at similar consulting firms, like one of the big three firms, Bain, McKinsey, BCG, or any of the big four, do they look pretty similar based on what you know, or does it kind of differ drastically based on the firm you're at?
Honestly, I'd say yes. So the current role I'm in, I'd probably not based off what I know. It might be different types of firms, or might be maybe more global. Except Slalom's a bit more of a local model. We usually work with, um, you know, Massachusetts kind of companies. If I'm in the Boston
Mm-hmm.
office, rather than somewhere way over in Africa, something like that. But in the end, the actual work, enterprise architecture, road mapping, investment analysis, that's similar for technology strategy as far as I'm aware. But I kind of had to push to really get in this kind of role, like I kind of indicated
Mm-hmm.
earlier. In general, from what I've noticed, at least in slalom, is that it's it is a lot more staff augmentation, a lot more project management,
Mm-hmm.
which compared to a McBain and McKinsey, those are strategy consulting firms, so it would not at all be like that. They're
Yep.
focused pretty much completely on strategy. If you talk about PwC, it depends. Sometimes they actually do some really interesting work in terms of, I don't know, architectures that are not necessarily technology strategy, but they're also not just project management. This kind of work in general. My point being, this kind of work is a bit rarer in slalom.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the work is more staff augmentation or project management, agile project management, which exists in other firms, but I'd say the percentage of work that's at Slalom that's project management based is higher than it would be at other firms.
Got it. And were there any surprises once you transition into this specific role you're in right now?
Um, Let me think. I'd say this specific role, I mean, I really didn't know fully what I was getting into, so sure, that was a surprise.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really know much about enterprise architecture, architectures in general, but I did end up learning a lot of things that I wanted to learn, whether it's strategy formulation, real critical thinking, the real consulting kind of skills, developing those, how to visualize things and actually develop architectures, things I really wanted to get before and I finally was getting. I feel like they're very useful now. Um, Other than that, I think those are the main surprises. But they're not really surprises. There's more things I wanted to develop. Wasn't really sure what to expect from this role. I'd say the main surprises I got originally were from my previous role. It was surprising how much I worked in staff auging, which was more of a disappointment, but still, I'd argue a useful skill, but definitely not something I wanted to stay in. Clearly.
Got it. And what kind of tools or softwares do you use on a day-to-day basis for your job?
Again, I feel like we keep on saying this, but it depends. Um, it's So back, especially when I was, leading a team of developers for agile kind of projects, I was a Scrum
Mm-hmm.
Master slash business analyst. I was definitely using Jira. I also use Rally for a more organization-wide agile transformation, helping them use that tool, scaled agile. So things like that, those DevOps kind of development tools. But in general, what I use now, it's much more strategic level.
Mm-hmm.
I should definitely be able to use a lot of different technologies, be comfortable with them because I need to advise people on them. But in the end, most of the time I'm using basic things like Excel,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of PowerPoint, and I emphasize that a lot of PowerPoint. It's
Mm-hmm.
90% of my job is just trying to develop architecture somewhere, most likely PowerPoint, and then just it's my job's really 99% of the time is communication. Or
Mm-hmm.
90% of the time is communication, so I have to be able to develop in a format that's visually appealing. So PowerPoint's very useful. So Excel, PowerPoint, Teams, we happen to use that. Slack is the same thing, to be honest. So like
Mm-hmm.
communication, collaboration tools, but nothing overly complicated, honestly, in my role. Just tools for communication, analysis, synthesis.
Got it. And in your specific role, what kind of soft skills and hard skills does someone need in order to be successful, in your opinion?
I can go off on a tangent about the hard side. I'll start with the soft skill side. Similar to what I was just saying about communication, is that whatever number it might be, whatever percentage it might be,
Mm-hmm.
it's definitely a huge part of my role because I have to be able to I have to be able to listen as much as like just absorb everything. Listen, I mean, honestly, by reading, but also listen by actually hearing what they're saying during
Mm-hmm.
workshops and pick out details. And as they're speaking during workshops, not only am I leading them, let me just take a step back. The workshops, so being able to lead workshops entails actually being able to structure it and guide people in the right direction, but also
Mm-hmm.
communication in terms of um, pushing them forward. Okay, I hear what you're saying. I've listened to what you're saying. What do you mean by this? Or actually, I'm hearing these kinds of themes. So
Mm-hmm.
all that being said, it's yeah, like I said, communication, listening are hugely important soft skills. Another piece is problem solving slash critical thinking. Those are definitely very overused terms in the world, but I feel like people never really understand what they are. And what I mean by that is just, I mean, that kind of what's very useful methodology is a scientific method, just really
Mm-hmm.
breaking things down and to clear hypotheses. I don't have to do that, but honestly, in this kind of role where you're solving problems every single day, it's really helpful to have a structured approach to it. So I definitely emphasize critical thinking, problem solving. Um, I'm not sure. I guess that's still a soft skill. And there's probably other ones. Those are the main ones that really pop to mind. In terms of hard skills, it's really hard to say. You're asking the person I still feel a little bit of a gap in terms of my the knowledge and skills I have because like I
Mm-hmm.
said before, I was never a developer, nor do I want to be personally. But I still feel being in a technology strategy role, it would be helpful to have a lot more knowledge in terms of um, not so high level stuff, a bit medium level, maybe lower level solutions architecture, things like that. And so I'd argue that you don't need it to do well in technology strategy. You definitely can have the more high level business process oriented skills that I definitely
Mm-hmm.
have. Um, but if you want to be really good and also if you want to keep on learning, which is where I'm trying to push myself, I personally feel that it would be useful to have at least a more medium level like solutions architecture sort of skills in terms of understanding how databases work, how front end works, how web services work. Not necessarily on a hugely deep level, but enough to enough to be able to understand how technologies come together at a high level.
And a lot of PowerPoint.
And a lot of PowerPoint. Let me underline that part.
What would you say are the best and the toughest parts of your job right now?
Sure. Best parts? None. No, I'm just kidding. No, I like it a lot. I'd say there's a couple things. I mean, it sounds cliche, but I do really enjoy meeting people all the time. That's a big. You have to enjoy
Mm-hmm.
talking to people. To be honest, and be in this role, just meeting new people, seeing their perspectives. Sure, tech people can be a pain in the butt. Business people can be different way, but also pain in the butt. But it's still interesting to meet them, and I feel like I'm constantly learning from them in different ways. Just at the very least, learning how to communicate between the two of them. That's hugely important for my job, and it's just interesting to me. Um, Also, I'd say what's going back to me being a nerd and just liking to learn constantly, continuous learning. Um, my job doesn't necessarily force me to learn all the time, but again, if you want to be successful in it, you should be learning constantly. And so, personally, I just enjoy the fact that I have a reason to read magazines every day, read books every day,
Mm-hmm.
constantly expand my brain, expand my skills, get new certifications because I can find a use for it in my job. Work. I just like that aspect. Worst things, it's I can say this depends on the company, it depends on the situation. Um, I'd say I'm 27. I work with a lot of people in my practice who are 35 to 50 years old around. So generally, people in this kind of role are a lot more, at least at my company, they have a lot more experience. And so I've definitely noticed because there's that big age gap and big experience gap, that there's a difference in how we view what I can contribute. There's
Mm-hmm.
definitely a disagreement there, and so that's been definitely a frustrating piece that has made me a realize maybe it's not a good fit for the company. B, they're probably wrong, but not necessarily. But C, also maybe I should honestly develop a bit more deeper knowledge and go into something that's more solutions architecture. For a job transition. So that's definitely one piece. That's more unique to my situation.
Mm-hmm.
It might depend on the company. It's because I'm by far the youngest one, and I'm the only one I'm the first one that's been in this kind of consultant role in technology strategy, at least in this practice in Boston. Anything else is in terms of the worst part of it. Um, no, I could argue different things. To me, that's been the most frustrating part. I
Mhm.
can try to argue, like I said before, I do like meeting new people, but also can be frustrating trying to speak with the technology people who want to go into a rabbit hole and very because they obviously have a lot of knowledge in very specific areas. So it can be very frustrating when I'm trying to tell them, stay here. No, we just want to. This
Yep.
this is what we want to cover. Stop going so deep into that areas, but that's part of the job. I don't mind. It gets frustrating, but also it's just a learning. It's a learning curve for me to be able to deal with that.
Got it. That makes sense. And from a compensation standpoint, I know you said you're 5 years out of college. What can someone in your role typically expect to make at Slalom or similar roles at other companies based on what you know?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, I'm 3 years out of my master's. Depends how you want to argue what that is. 5 years out of my grad, 3 years out of my master's. Um, so in my role in technology strategy in Boston, it's so specific to where you are, what role you're in,
Mm-hmm.
what company you're in, largely at least. Where I'm at, I'd say anywhere between I don't know 100 to 130, something
Mm-hmm.
like that. And so I'm at a consultant role, very close to senior consultant. Arguably a senior consultant. It's just this practice is a little wonky in terms of titles.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, it's kind of a
Got it.
hard question to answer.
And what advice would you give someone who is looking to be in a similar position as yourself? Someone who's probably in college right now and they're thinking through potential career paths.
Yeah, I'd say try to. This is such an annoying. When you're an undergrad, I know how annoying it is when people say, "Oh, just network." It makes no. When you're an undergrad, without the context, it makes absolutely no sense, and I get that. Um, network. It, try it as much as possible, as much as it's annoying. Try to talk to people at firms, whether it's if it's possible, talk to people at BCG or Bain or McKinsey,
Mm-hmm.
if you like um, that kind of strategy firm, they have a certain culture that I don't agree with, but they definitely are strategy firms. Point being, just try to learn as much as possible from people who are in industry, who are in the roles you potentially could see yourself, because they can give you the insight that you really can't get. Um, it's I'd say the main thing you should really be asking yourself is take a step back from this specific role, this specific company, and ask yourself, do you see yourself in this overall industry, or do you find it, at least at the very least, do you find it interesting?
Mm-hmm.
I consider myself in tech. I'm not a developer. I'm not a project manager, thank God. But I mean, I work a lot with tech, and I find it fascinating. Every single day, I'm reading different articles, and I just love reading about it. It's really cool what we can potentially do with it. If there's any areas where you even somewhat start to see yourself thinking, "Oh, this is really fascinating to me," like I could read this at least once a week. I could read about
Mm-hmm.
this, then or listen to talks about it. Then that's great. Start to dig into that a bit more and talk to people there. Maybe get an internship. Experience is definitely the best lesson you can get. Probably best thing you can do. So I mean, that's one area is think about what do you really like doing, what do you find yourself really, what do you really enjoy? And the way I see, at least with career development, I forgot who, I think it might have been Melinda Gates. She had come to our master's program. And she had said this like kind of like trifecta of how you do career planning. One of them is what do you like doing? What do you find fascinating? What I was just talking about. Second one is what are you good at? I mean, sure, you can like something a lot, but you might suck at it, which is, I mean, sorry, but you just shouldn't do that area. You can try
Mm-hmm.
to get better at it, but there are sometimes you need to accept what are you good at and what you're not good at. Just do
Mm-hmm.
honestly, some serious reckoning. So, what are you good at? What do you do well in? Or where can you push yourself to be really good at? If you really, the passion can help a lot with that. And last one is what does the world actually need? I mean, someone can argue that underwater basket weaving that the world actually needs that or something like that. There's like these very specific areas, but maybe that's the case. But if you find yourself having a hard time arguing that there is actually a need for this, then maybe you should move to
Mm-hmm.
another area. Fortunately, tech, whether it's AI, Internet of Things, a lot of sexy terms, or whatever you might find in tech, there's just such a realm of possibility in what you can do and what's actually important for the world right now that tech is definitely very easy for you to find reasons. I think
Yep.
all three of those areas, but especially why it's actually important to the world. The point being, whatever industry, I'm not saying necessarily advocating for tech, but whatever industry you're looking at, whatever area you're looking at, try to ask yourself, am I lying to myself that this is actually important, or is this actually something that could be if not now, in the future, it could be really useful for the world. Maybe you can make it that way. I don't know. But those are three really important questions to ask yourself.
And you're saying underwater basket weaving is not important to the world?
No, I was saying it is. Just some people think it's not, but I think it is.
Well, last question for you. Is there anything else you would do differently if you had a chance to go back and do it over again with your career?
Yeah, I think I'd start. There's my senior year. I met this guy named Adish Rai. I would go back and never meet that guy again. No, I'm just kidding. That was a good choice. um, so that's definitely a tough question for me personally because I'm a huge advocate of. Again, this is another cliche. I'm always saying cliches, but it's true. You are where you are in your life at this point because you made the choices you did in the past. I can try to argue so many
Mm-hmm.
different things from high school, middle school, undergrad, like, oh, I shouldn't have done that, but I wouldn't. It wouldn't. I wouldn't be at this point in my life thinking, oh, God damn it, I need to make these choices now. I need to do that now. I wouldn't have as much
Mm-hmm.
drive as I do now if I didn't make those mistakes. You make those mistakes because you clearly didn't understand who you are enough, or you didn't understand
Mm-hmm.
what was the right choice. I mean, what could I do differently? Should I have done chemical? Should I not have done chemical engineering, gone instead to computer science or business, and maybe studied abroad and actually enjoyed that more? I could have done that, but I'd definitely be a different person. I value that I learned a lot from chemical engineering, that it definitely
Mm-hmm.
pushed me in certain ways that I wouldn't have gone from other areas. Um, do I wish I had tried other firms? Do I wish I went for a McKinsey or Bain or BCG? Maybe, maybe not. Again, that'd be a different path. Um, I'd say, if anything, it's less a question of what should you do differently and just more just in the if there's anything I would do differently, I think it would be to listen to myself a bit even more than I did. If I know something's wrong, I know this is a wrong path. Just understand that, accept that, ask yourself why, and then move toward where you feel, or at least move away from the area you know is wrong. That way, you can save yourself a lot of headaches and wasted time. Is one way to put it. Yeah.
Well, there we go. Brian, thanks so much for joining us. That was super helpful.
Thank you for having me. It was definitely quite enjoyable.
All right, that's a wrap. Thanks for listening in. And once again, if you'd like to speak to any of the guests featured on the podcast or anyone else who's in a career that is of interest to you, feel free to send us an email at hello@consultspot.com or just check out consultspot.com and we'll set you up with a one-on-one call so you can get more personal advice and make better career decisions. If you like the podcast, feel free to leave a rating on whatever platform you're listening to, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever that might be. It really helps us grow. You can also follow us on social media. It's either ConsultSpot or ConsultSpot app on pretty much all the platforms, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, you name it. That's pretty much it. I'll catch you on the next one. Bye.